again. Bill Pfeiffer being with you. Good to be with you. Nice story today, true story. If this doesn't kind of light your fire, maybe you're working with some wet wood. This is really a really nice story. It happened to a pastor who was very young. His church was very old. Once long ago it had flourished. Famous men had preached from its pulpit, prayed before its altar. Rich and poor alike worshipped there and kept it beautiful. Now the good days had passed from that section of town where it stood. But the pastor and his young wife believed in their rundown church. They felt that with paint, a hammer, and faith they could get it back in shape. Together they went to work. But in late December, a severe storm whipped through the river valley, and the worst blow fell on the little church. A huge chunk of rain-soaked plaster fell off on the inside wall, just behind the altar. Sorrowfully, the pastor and his wife swept away the mess, but they couldn't hide the ragged hole. The pastor looked at it and had to remind himself quickly, "Thy will be done." But his wife wept. Christmas is only 2 days away. That afternoon, the dispirited couple attended an auction held for the benefit of a youth group. The auctioneer opened a box and shook out a handsome gold and ivory lace tablecloth. It was a magnificent item, nearly 15 feet long, but it too dated from a long-vanished era. Who, today, had any use for such a thing? There were a few half-hearted bids. The pastor was seized with what he thought was a great idea. He bid it in for $6.50. He carried the cloth back to the church and tacked it up on the wall behind the altar. It completely hid the hole. And the extraordinary beauty of its shimmering handiwork cast a fine holiday glow over the chancel. It was a great triumph. Happily, the pastor went back to preparing his Christmas sermon. Just before noon on the day of Christmas Eve, as the pastor was opening the church, he noticed a woman standing in the cold at the bus stop. "The bus won't be here for 40 minutes, he said, and invited the woman into the church to get warm. She told him that she had come from the city that morning to be interviewed for a job as governess to the children of one of the wealthy families in town, but that she had been turned down. She was a war refugee, and her English was quite imperfect. The woman sat down in a pew, chafed her hands, and rested. After a while she dropped her head and prayed. She looked up as the pastor began to adjust the great ivory and gold lace cloth across the hole. The woman rose suddenly and walked up the steps of the chancel. She looked at the tablecloth. The pastor smiled and started to tell her about the storm damage, but she didn't seem to listen. She took up a fold of the cloth and rubbed it between her fingers. "It's mine," she said. "It's my banquet cloth." She lifted the corner and showed the surprised pastor that there were initials monogrammed on it. "My husband had the cloth made especially for me in Brussels. There could not be another like it." For the next few minutes, the woman and pastor talked excitedly together. She explained that she was Viennese, that she and her husband had opposed the Nazis and had decided to leave the country. They were advised to go separately. They planned that he would join her as soon as he could, arrange to ship their household goods across the border. She never saw him again. Later, she had heard that he had died in a concentration camp. "I have always felt that it was my fault to leave without him," she said. "Perhaps these years of wandering have been my punishment." The pastor tried to comfort her and urged her to take the cloth with her. She refused, then went away. As the church began to fill on Christmas Eve, it was clear that the cloth was going to be a great success. It had been skillfully designed to look its best by candlelight. After the service, the pastor stood at the doorway. Many people told him that the church looked beautiful. One gentle-faced, middle-aged man, he was the local clock and watch repairman, looked rather puzzled. "It is strange," he said in his soft accent. "Many years ago, my wife, God rest her, and I owned such a cloth. In our home in Vienna, my wife used to put it on the table." Here he smiled, but only when the bishop came to dinner. The pastor suddenly became very excited. He told the jeweler about the woman who had been in the church earlier in the day. The startled jeweler clutched the pastor's arm. "Can it be? Does she live?" Together the two got in touch with the family who had interviewed her. Then in the pastor's car they started for the city. And as Christmas Day was born, the man and his wife, who had been separated through so many saddened Yule-tides, were reunited. To all who heard this story, the joyful purpose of the storm that knocked a hole in the wall of the church was now quite clear. Of course, people said it was a miracle, and I think you will agree it was the season for it. It's a beautiful story by Howard Shade. It's really good for us to read stories like this. It touches our heart and prepares our heart for the birth of Jesus who's coming. And it's important that we end up recognizing and knowing the full intent and power of the coming of Jesus, the incarnation. He came to redeem us. He came on this small little planet. God, I remember hearing it compared to the whole universe like a little pea floating in space, and that's what we are. We're not much more than that little pea or a marble. And but he came to redeem us because we needed redemption. We needed to be freed from the human condition that just continues to drag us down and down, as is happening these days. So I'd like to finish with a quote from Meister Eckhart, a 13th century Christian mystic, to kind of bring us back to the center of the reason for this season. He said, Meister Eckhart did, "What good is it to me if the eternal birth of the divine Son takes place unceasingly, but does not take place within myself? What good is it to me for the Creator to give birth to the Son of God if I do not also give birth to Him in my time and in my culture?" Test yourself. 2 Corinthians 13. Test yourself. Do you acknowledge that Jesus the Christ is really living in you? If not, you failed the test. So one of the effects of the incarnation is to have God dwelling within us and inside of you at this very moment. Happiness tomorrow really depends on doing the truth today. And that truth today includes the incredible presence of the Lord within our hearts as a result of the incarnation, Christmas, the coming of Jesus in a few days. God bless you. Good to be with you. Keep me in your prayers daily. You are in mine.
Jesus, Lord, at thy birth, silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly sleep in heaven.